Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you to everyone who is here in person. And also thank you to everyone who's joining on Zoom. So as you know, the workshop today is gonna be on personal statements. So how it's gonna go, we have a few slides prep for the first half of today, until about like 7:15. We're gonna just talk about like some tips and tricks for writing an ideal personal statement. And then we'll break up into groups. If you filled out the RSVP form, we basically got feedback of like kind of having two groups. One is going to be focused on sort of structural feedback. So if you already have a draft of your personal statement and want to talk about like how to improve its flow and structure, you should join that group. If you don't yet have your personal statement and you're looking for like inspiration slash um, just like prompts for reflection and thinking about what you might want to put in your personal statement. We'll have a second group for that. We'll also like split people up into breakout rooms on Zoom so you can join like whichever group works best for you. And then if you haven't already, please sign in using this QR code. If you can take a second now and do that, this just helps us like keep track of how many people are coming to workshops and keep you on our list of people to reach out to about future events.
Mhm. And then there's the one-on-one feedback form. Is that at the end?
We'll do it then, yeah.
Okay, great.
Okay, so we'll start off. So a little bit of introduction for those of you who aren't familiar with White Coats. So we're a group of medical students at the UC Berkeley UCSF Joint Medical Program. And essentially the goal of White Coats is to improve the entrance of URM students into medicine. So we're the Pathways team. We offer a number of workshops and like guidance resources on applying to medical school, including like MCAT, letters of rec, the whole MCAS process. But we have other arms of our program. So we have a mentorship program dedicated to pairing URM students with a one-on-one medical student mentor. We have a scholarship program. We also do a lot of advocacy in this field. But essentially our goal is just really increase the representation of URM folks in medicine. And so if you don't already follow us on Instagram or have access to our website, I highly encourage you to bookmark that or check our Instagram. So that's where we post a lot of upcoming events. For example, the Pathways team has organized an MCAT book loaning program. And so if you are studying for the MCAT within the next 6 months, we highly encourage you to check out a set of Princeton review books so that it can save you some money. And it's yours for however long, 3 to 6 months, I think. So check that out. It's on our website, and as well as like future events related to the MCAS process. So I was thinking we could also start with some introductions, just going around the room, and then people who are on Zoom, if you could put your intros in the chat. We love to just get to know a little bit about who you are, sort of, where you are at with the process, where I assume you all go to Berkeley and like, so what your major is, and kind of where you're at with your personal statement. So I'll start off with introductions. I'm Kamu. I'm one of the Pathways co-leads. I'm a second year at the JMP, and I went to Berkeley first.
Well,
Want to go?
sure. I'll come over here.
Oh, yeah.
I'm in like two screens. Hi, everyone. My name is Lynn. I'm also a second year medical student, one of the Pathways co-leads, and my alma mater was UC Davis.
Oh my God, but Zoom.
Hi everyone, my name is Samira. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a first year at the JMP and I went to Berkeley for undergrad.
I'll give you a second. Bryson, you want to go?
Sure. I'm Bryson, I'm second year at JMP, and I am on finance and the White Coats. I'm mainly just here for the pizza. So,
Nice.
He's our delivery man, so
and I'm
Yeah.
the pizza delivery guy.
yeah.
Okay. And then Genesis.
Hi everyone. Hi everyone. I'm Genesis. I'm actually a first year in my undergrad. I'm majoring in MCB and data science. And as for my draft, I think I have like a Google document, but that's about it.
That is ahead of where
Yeah,
I
you're
am.
you're very early.
My fourth year. Okay. Do you want to start off and then we can go around the room?
Sure. I'm Jocelyn. I'm a first year here in the maternal child medicine epidemiology master program. And I'm hoping to apply this cycle. We'll see what happens.
Hi, I'm Sydney. I graduated from UCLA in 2022, so I'm in like my second year of my postdoc. Also planning to apply the cycle, and I've drafted things.
Hi, I'm Nina Lynn. I am a fourth year here at Berkeley. I'm a public health major, and I'm in my beginning stages of my draft.
Hi everyone, my name is Nora. I'm a public health fourth year undergrad here at Berkeley. And yeah, I'm also in the beginning stages of my draft. I have a draft going on.
Hi, I'm Ayush. I am third year at Berkeley, MCB, and I'm just brainstorming.
Hi, my name is Kirby. I'm also third year at Berkeley, majoring in political science. And I'm also just brainstorming.
Hi everyone, my name is Layla and I am non-traditional, graduated class from UCLA 2014. Done a postdoc and either applying this year or next year. I have a draft, but I'm like somewhat confident about it, somewhat not. And I'm doing a lot of nonprofit work in my absence work.
Hey everyone, I'm Kaylee. I graduated from Berkeley last year. I majored in MCB and right now I'm doing the postdoc at UCSF. And I'm on my second draft, so we're working with something, but I just wanted to get like more in depth and more personal.
Okay, awesome. Thank you all for the instructions and thank you for everyone who shared in the chat. We all hope that everyone will get something out of today. So on to the next slide. So we're gonna talk a little bit, just like an overview of the personal statement now. I think it's this slide, Lynn.
Is that me?
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
I can't see.
Oh, wait.
What?
Yeah. So what is a personal statement? This is the first thing, or usually the first thing that everyone thinks about when applying to medical school, right? It's your opportunity to share like who you are, what your story is, what your background is, and obviously why you want to go into medicine. This is a very effective piece to the AdCom or admissions committees to get a really quick overview of who you are to your core. And then for those who are applying only allopathic, why is an MD specifically what you need to accomplish your goal and career aspirations? Because there are also DO schools, which is another separate app. And I think like, you know, these personal statements are now like pretty much shared. You don't really have to explain why MD, but again, like you might be asked those questions in the interview. But one of the most essential parts of creating your personal statement is reflection, like understanding who you are and like what you bring to the field and what you hope to accomplish as a future physician. And then also we will be fielding questions in the chat. So Genesis will tell me if anyone in the chat has any questions.
And those of us in the room, like
Yeah,
just
just
feel free
raise
to
your
raise your
hand.
hand. Yeah.
Mhm.
And there will be a recording.
Yeah. Okay. So where do we start, right? I think starting the personal statement is the hardest part. Getting words down to a paper of who you are is honestly like very vulnerable. So just some questions to consider. Why do you want to be a doctor? Like be very specific. I think when I first started writing my personal statement, one of the advice that I got from one of my writing teachers was to turn off my screen if you have a second monitor and just like write blindly and just essentially articulate like, why do you want to be a doctor? Like, you know, what is your background? And when you open that screen again, there's just a jumble of words and just parse through it and go from there. But another couple questions to consider is what really motivates you to learn about medicine. There's a lot of different fields out there. You could be an MP, you could be a PA. What motivates you to specifically be a doctor and learn about medicine? And then what do you want medical schools to know about you that has not been shared in any other section of your primary application? Of course, there will be repeats of like experiences. Sometimes you want to go deeper into maybe like your meaningful experience in the activities section, but your primary, your primary application is generally going to be an entire narrative that you're going to weave from your personal statement to your secondaries, to your activities. So you want them to be kind of unique on its own, but also form a narrative at the end, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so you may be thinking about where to start with your personal statement, and this is where the first draft comes into play. And our advice is essentially to kind of word vomit, like anything that comes to mind, different topics, different stories that you've had, different experiences in your life, even if you don't think it relates like specifically to like academia or your why medicine, like how you grew up, anything that comes to mind would be important, and sort of not putting yourself in a box during this stage and just really writing down any stories that comes to mind, and also thinking about like the narrative of it all, thinking if the stories like fit well together. Yeah, does anyone have any questions about that? Okay. And yeah, and if you already have an idea of what you want to write about for your topic, we would suggest doing the same as the previous slide, but maybe with that specific topic, thinking of stories or experiences in undergrad or any clinical experiences that you've had that sort of tie into your narrative. And also looking at previous applicants' statements for inspiration is also very helpful. And I always plug like the AAMC competencies document that they have, because they list out things that they specifically look for. And I like when I was doing mine, like I tried to write down experiences that fit those certain like topics. So you kind of have like a guide when you're brainstorming. Okay, next slide. Thanks. So just thinking about additional reflection prompts. So thinking about like what your core values are or your personal mission. What are things that are important to you? Like that could be like community, that could be other things as well. And that will also guide like the schools that you pick as well. It'll guide like what you want to say in your personal statement. Thinking about how the events in your life influence your motivations to become a doctor and values in life. Thinking about maybe like how you grew up, like your family's experiences, how you feel like that fits into your narrative for why you want to be a doctor and what kind of doctor you want to be is super important as well. Who in your life has influenced you the most? What are your strengths? What makes you you? So thinking about things that you think are unique to you. So for me, like, for example, like I wrote a lot about like being first generation and how that impacted me, and like why like I wanted to be a doctor. So that's just also like another example of like maybe you don't think that's like a specific like experience or a specific thing that ties into your why medicine, but it talks a lot about you, and that is what medical schools are looking for, how you stand out from other applicants and what you've learned about yourself through different experiences that you've had either clinically or in school as well.
Yeah, so before we talk a little bit about like kind of how to go about editing, I just want to say a couple of things. Like one, like I feel like a really helpful place to start if you're stuck on where to start with your personal statement is just like talk to a friend or like your mom and like tell them like why you want to be a doctor, right? And I think like whenever students come to me like asking for help, I'm like, just tell me like in your own words, like what is it that brought you to medicine? And I feel like that's a really helpful place to start, because it's like, what is the actual story you're trying to tell? Like what truly brought you here? And the other thing is that I think a lot of people are like, oh, but what do medical schools want to see, right? And I really like want to emphasize like there is no like formula of like what medical schools want to see. Like they want to see your story. So I think the most important thing is to like just be as genuine as possible and like authentic to your true, what is the real reason that brought you to medicine? Like why do you want to be a doctor? And I think like it's very easy to get kind of caught up or like confused by like, oh, but they want to see you talk about research, they want you to see you talk about this experience or that. Like I just really advise you to like focus on like your honest answer to like what brings you to medicine. And at the end of the day, if a school doesn't vibe with that, like, do you really want to go to the school that doesn't like the genuine version of yourself? I think not. And so, like talk it out, like just even say it in a voice memo. And then like we said before, either like turn off your screen and just free write or like set a timer for like 15 or 20 minutes, write some stuff down and then like come back to it the next day. I think all of those have been like really helpful techniques for students who especially are like facing that writing block of like trying to say things in the best way possible before you even know like what you're going to say. So going into a little bit about like how to go about editing if you have like a first draft of your personal statement. So the first thing is like, what is the point you're trying to make? And again, this is going back to like, if you had to say in like 3 sentences, like why you want to go into medicine, that's your thesis. That is the point you're trying to make this essay. So does every part of your essay lead to you making that point? Or are you kind of going on tangents of like overly describing like this one experience you had that maybe could be put in your resume section? Or maybe you're like, oh, and I had this one other experience, but that doesn't really tie into my overall narrative. So like sometimes you have to kind of just cut stuff out. And at the end of the day, you only have about a page to write this whole thing. Not every experience that impacted your journey in medicine is not going to make it into this particular essay. And so that's also why we encourage thinking about it as like, this is one part of your application, right? You have your work and activities section to talk about all the different experiences you've had. You have your supplemental essays, you have your letters of rec. So like what can go here that like you haven't been able to say other places, and not everything is going to be here. And that's okay. Like it is not going to be like your magnum opus. It's just one part of your application. Other things you want to ask yourself, like, do the paragraphs flow to one paragraph to another? So I feel like one of the biggest concerns I see when I'm editing personal statements is like, you start out talking about one thing and then like all of a sudden you're talking about this different thing and you're like, wait, how do we get to this other experience? And I find that students who are trying to fit too many things into their personal statement, like too many experiences, 4 or 5, that ends up being very disjointed because you're like, I don't really get how this point led into the other point. So try to think of like, what is a simple story you can tell and that will lead throughout your essay? Remember, admissions officers are probably going to spend like maybe 5 minutes reading this essay. So you want to be really clear. And while it's true, it's important to like show things, you kind of sometimes have to spell things out too. You have to say like, and I learned this, and this. Should that be the only thing you're doing? No, but like, if you leave too much to the creativity, then like your message is going to get lost. Second, again, like I said before, is it actually an authentic and genuine story that reflects your experiences? I feel like that is so much more powerful than like talking about how much you love research if like research is not your biggest love. And then lastly, like Samira said, thinking about like what are those qualities that you have that make you special, that make you fit for medicine, that are going to come up in your personal statement. And again, there's going to be no formula. Everyone has unique characteristics. Someone else might talk about like scientific curiosity, and if that's not you, that's not you. That is totally fine, as long as you feel like it's genuinely like representing yourself. Am I doing the next slide too? I think. Yeah. Okay. And so on that note, like in terms of like trying to figure out, is this really me? Something I've really advised students is like, one, you should definitely get a number of people to look at your personal statement, and remember, like, people are going to share their opinions, and their opinions are not fact, even if they're like the dean of the School of Medicine. Like that is one person's opinion. I think something I see a lot of students kind of be like, oh, well, this person said I should say this, but I'm like, well, is that true to you, or like you're just saying it because that person said it? So get opinions from everyone, but remember, like, it's your essay and you should do what resonates the most with you. What someone thinks is what someone thinks. Take everything with a grain of salt. Use separate documents for each person that you send it to, so you're not getting confused about all the edits that you're getting. Send it to usually like one at a time, and then like take their edits, revise it, and then send it to the next person, so you're not getting a bunch of edits on the same essay that kind of like cancel each other out, and then like you're kind of confused about it. And then tell them really specifically, like, what is it that you're looking for? In the beginning stages, you're probably looking for structural feedback. Say like, does this flow well? Do I make a good point? Do you feel like this resonates with you? But as you go along, maybe you want like more specific wording phrases. Because I think it's not super helpful if you're like in the big picture phase and then people are editing your grammar, right? Like that's not really what you need at that time. And then some people like to look at other people's personal statements. Personally, I did not. I felt like it would like kind of cloud the story that I was trying to tell, so I try to focus on my own. And then lastly, like I said, you want to see that it's genuine to you, right? And I think it's really helpful to have editors of like 2 varieties. One group of people who know you super well and can tell you like, hey, Kamu, like this is an essay, like that's really like Kamu of you to say this. So this is very genuine to who you are. And the other group of people are people who like don't really know you at all. And then you can kind of test like, how does this land for you? Like, what is the message you're receiving? And is that the same as the message that I'm trying to put across? Because if you send your essay only to people who know you well, they'll be like, yeah, I totally like, I love it. But it's like, oh, because they know you, they're adding in that subtext of like their relationship with you into how they're receiving your essay. So you kind of need both to like understand, am I saying the message I want to say? And then also, is that message actually being received by a stranger who's going to read my essay in an admissions committee? Before we go into some common mistakes, anyone have any questions about like the editing process or like other issues that have come up? Okay, great. I'm gonna go wash my hands.
Yeah. And then just to expand on some of these bullet points, looking at other personal statements, I did just because I took a couple of gap years and my friends, a lot of my friends were in medical school already. So I looked at, some of them were very generous to offer me to look at their personal statements. I looked at it for flow, for grammar, for how they utilize transition sentences. So really look at it for structure, not the content, because the content should be from you, right? Like genuinely. And then the second advice I have is, if you have a friend who majors in English, or majors in any sort of social sciences, they write essays all the time, send it to them and have them correct it because we are not English majors. I mean, at least for me, like I took a lot of heavy science classes in college, and I just didn't flex that writing skill until I had to write all these essays all of a sudden, you know, like it's just kind of jarring to go from like studying for biochem to like writing like 20 essays in one summer. So that's just a tip there. And then we're going to go into some common mistakes. And this is kind of like a reiteration of what Kamu said, but overall flow, like I mentioned, talking to your English major friends about good transitions, those are so powerful as you go from story to story, especially if you're tying in like 2 or 3 experiences together and they're kind of disjointed, right? Like for me, I really wanted to go to a school that emphasized public health, such as Berkeley. So I had all these like public health and like consulting experiences. And I'm like, how did I tie that to my clinical experiences? So really understanding good transitions so that these disjointed stories don't feel disjointed. And then that kind of flows into theme and content. So your entire essay, even though, you know, like you've taken some gap years, you're a public health major, like you should answer why medicine specifically, right? Take all these nuggets from your life and you can always tie them back into medicine because again, like there's so many things involved in medicine. Like if you worked with, I don't know, the city council on like housing projects, that is directly tied into healthcare. So yeah, but again, like don't use stories that are entirely relevant, right? We don't really want to hear about how you worked in a research lab like for 2 paragraphs in a row because yes, that is related to medicine, but there's a whole human connection side that you want to talk about that are more relevant. And yeah, I talked about like too much details about one experience, specifically research. So you don't want to bore the audience either. And then common mistakes. So like Kamu said, you don't want to tell. You don't want to say like, I did XYZ experience for this long. And then I did this other experience for this long. Genuinely reflect on it. Did it make you a better person? Was it your like foundation point into diving into more public health issues? Did you discover another part of yourself that makes you want to become a good physician? I think at a lot of schools nowadays, we see this narrative of like, okay, you want to be a physician and, right? That's like at the JMP, a lot of us are like physician and advocate, policymaker, public health researcher. I think at UCLA, that's like a huge theme. So you really want to show like these sides of you that make you unique. And yeah, it just like you're more than just a future physician, I want to say, because you have so many stories to tie in from your personal experience that make you a whole person just that happens to want to go into medicine as well. And then as for conclusion, I think this is a really hard part of the personal statement because you kind of want to wrap your personal statement in a nice little bow. But also at the same time, you don't want to summarize everything that you just said. So just again, one of our pre-work assignments was to write your own mission statement. So look back to that and see how you can write a conclusion from that. So like look at your entire personal statement, look at your mission statement. What is that one thing that you want to get across to the admissions committee, right? They're going to read your personal statement and come up with a one-liner for you. So that's essentially what you want to do in the conclusion as well.
Just a comment about like the telling too much
Yeah.
thing. Like I think that so like a lot of times like when you write like essays, it's like, oh, you want to show not tell, which is definitely true. But one thing that I think is unique to the personal statement is that the telling is important when you do it in the form of reflection. So it's like you can write this whole thing of like, and this patient, and we did this, and then that, and then you really need a sentence or two to be like, and from that, this is what I learned. And like that is the place that telling has in a personal statement is to like tie it together and say, this is how, in explicit words, this is how this experience led me to pursue medicine. And I often find that students who completely omit the telling part, then I'm like, what are you even trying to say here? And also, like, again, someone's like probably reading this in a very fast way. You kind of wanted to point out to them and like, and this is exactly what I got from this experience. This is exactly the trait that I gained. I think sometimes you do need to spell things out for the reader.
Any questions from this group right now? Alrighty. So if there's no more questions, we're gonna go into group reflection. And just a reminder, there's gonna be 2 breakout rooms. I think, do you know how to set up the breakout rooms?
I don't think I'm.
Oh, it's okay. We can do
yeah.
it. But one room is going to be more brainstorming, like you haven't really started. You want to understand how to reflect well, and like how to translate that into paper. And then the group that I'm going to lead is more like structural feedback, how to specifically, like what you're struggling on, how to specifically edit segments of the personal statement. I will be showing like a section of my own personal statement that we will go through together and see like what went wrong in the first draft and what I ended up submitting. And then in groups as well, we're gonna go over some of the pre-work. Totally fine if you didn't do it, but just in general, where it's like, what is your personal mission statement? And then if you did see the WMC core competencies, how do those reflect in your personal statement? And then what about your journey in medicine is missing in this draft? So, yeah.
You had a question?
Yeah, I was thinking while thinking about the big three, I feel like this is like a very relevant question to y'all since the UC Berkeley or UCSF program is also like very focused on like social justice and public health and kind of comprehensive medicine. And I think generally like some of the feedback I've like heard people who are like on that, like interested in that pathway, like myself as well, is that like the personal statement maybe sounds a little bit too much like public health oriented and kind of more, you know, maybe not as clinical. And I'm just wondering like in general, like how you all have like dealt with kind of that feedback and how to make it sound like, oh, like why don't you just go into policy or public health, when I feel like nowadays we're kind of really bridging those in medicine more than we were before.
Yeah, so for those on Zoom who maybe didn't hear the question, it was about how to address feedback on your personal statement that you're, for those people who are interested in pursuing a dual degree in public health or something else, how do you address the feedback that you're like too public health oriented and not enough like clinical? I have thoughts, but if you want to go first. No. Yeah, this kind of feedback makes me so mad. I got it a lot too, especially from those Berkeley pre-med advisors. And like, I think at the end of the day, it's like, I definitely was like, people were like, you should talk about the pathophysiology of medicine more, like how that makes you want it. I'm like, that is not why I want to do medicine, like, period, right? Like that is not my reason. Like my reason is that I see like an interplay between being like a public health like advocate and also like a physician, and like those two things go hand in hand. And that's exactly what I talked about. I was like, yeah, like I want to do public health, and this is like everything that I've learned about public health, but also like all of that knowledge is grounded in my interactions with individuals, and like as a physician, like an advocate for that on both like an individual and like a macro level. And I think that like there's a shift happening and then like the field of medicine to be more like understanding that medicine and public health are not like mutually exclusive, but rather like go hand in hand. And honestly, my reasoning was like, if I talk about public health in my statement and a school does not want me, they probably don't value public health and advocacy, and I don't want them. Like that was like, and I understand that's a big privilege to say like, oh, I don't want a medical school, but I also feel like I knew it was such a huge part of my identity, a part of my like background. And so I didn't want to be an institution that would be like, yeah, we're gonna like grind pathophys and like in your spare time you can think about like people as a person. Like that was just like not something that resonated with me. And so I feel like again, everyone's gonna have their opinion. Personally, I think it's important to like be authentic to your journey. And if like public health is a big part of that, then that should be in your personal statement. And if it's not, it's not. Like there's no like we should not try to pander to what the medical schools want, because like not every medical school wants the same thing. And ideally, like the programs that are like public health focused and integrating that perspective, like the JMP, will see your passion for public health as like a strength rather than like a weakness. And that's the kind of institution that ideally you would end up at. That is my thoughts. Put it up to yours.
Yeah, I agree. I also think that's like one of the things that will make you unique with your personal statement. Like a lot of people will talk about like Kamala was saying like the pathophysiology of medicine and like we'll go into the sciences and the research, but like if you want to stand out, if that is what you're passionate about, then I would say go for it. Like I think even for me, like my personal statement was super like non-traditional. Like I talked a lot about my upbringing, I talked a lot about like public health. And I think those are one of the things that made me successful. Like other students probably are not talking about that. So I definitely agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I think lastly, I just want to say that, so the JMP sent us to DC recently, and we had the opportunity to talk to a bunch of like staffers, for congressmen, and help advocate for a couple of bills that are on the docket for 2023 and for. And every single time we advocated to these staffers, we brought up a personal patient story. And like, how do we get those? It's because we are future physicians, like we work in the clinics that these policies and, big, large structural like changes are like affecting patients, right? So like, how do you even get that if you don't really understand public health and medicine? Like, it's just like the joining of the two that makes you an efficient advocate. We visited the Maternal Child Health Bureau. So many of them are pediatricians, and because of what they saw every day in practice is what led them to be public health advocates and work in federal policy to change the way that we practice and advance health equity, right? So like Dean Liu, the dean of our public school, the School of Public Health, was a JMP alumni. He was like the director of the Maternal Child Health Bureau, created a bunch of programs, including Healthy Start, which like a bunch of pediatricians at UCSF use today. So like I say it's very intertwined. You should definitely talk about it. If you want concrete advice, you could talk about like different policies or like public health issues you care about in the context of one patient, to really hone into that clinical experience that, schools do want to see.
And I'll share, like, in my personal statement, I talked about like a patient that I saw who was being impacted by all these like social determinants of health, and how like I saw those things intertwine in like his daily life. Because at the end of the day, like public health issues, like they affect people, right? They affect individuals. And like, yes, we look at it on like a population level, but those population is made of individuals. So I definitely think there's a connection. And I think that like the old guard of medicine was like, we're objective and like we just focus on like the pathophys, but like the reality is that like every person is affected by social issues, and like every person has basic needs. So if your institution is like has not come to that conclusion yet, then like maybe they won't like resonate with your personal statement, but I think there's a lot of institutions that have come there and like they will definitely resonate with it. Yeah.
Yes.
I just want to say I really appreciate your question as a master public health student. I have the same exact concern. So thank you so much. And I think just building off of that too, I wanted to say that I worry about talking about public health issues and then it coming off like I'm bashing medicine or bashing the healthcare system, because in a way I am bashing the healthcare system. I think the healthcare
As you
system is
should.
really broken.
Yeah.
But I don't know how that's going to be perceived in my personal statement, right? And I don't want it to sound overly negative. So if you have any advice on kind of navigating that.
Yeah. For those on Zoom who might not have heard the question, it was about how to navigate like critiquing the healthcare system without sounding like overly negative.
Sure, I can, I guess. I think one advice about that is to use those issues to frame how you will better the field. So for instance, in my personal statement, I talked a lot about working in a free clinic and like, like individuals stretching their insulin because they can't afford it. And I'm like, that is a result of the broken healthcare system, but I want to be the one who advocates for change to get them access to insurance to make sure they can pay for their medications on time, or to connect them with like patient assistance programs for them to be able to afford their medication. So you could frame that in a way of like you will be there to change the system, or you have ideas to change the system, or if you worked on XYZ addressing this like public health issue. So that's how I would frame it.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think that's a great way to be like, and this is why I should be a doctor, because I can be a person.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. I think also framing it in a way of like, this is my experience, like this is like what I saw like through that patient interaction, or like for me, like I talked about like my family's like health history, like this is what I saw and this is like what happened because of that. So I think like as long as you frame it with your perspective and your experiences, I think it's okay, rather than just like talking about a bunch of things that are bad, which is like also true. But yeah.
That's super helpful. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Any other questions before we break out into rooms?
Including for from folks on Zoom.
Okay, so now we're gonna do some breakout rooms.
Stop share.
Yeah.
Should I make the rooms?
Yeah.
Okay. So give me 1 second. I'm gonna make some breakout rooms. Actually, I'm gonna stop recording first.
Yeah.